Charlie Goldensohn, welcome.
What's up, dude?
Stoked. Thank you for being here.
Stoked to be here.
Fired up.
Yeah, it's
so
crazy.
You've heard bits and pieces about it, but this is what I call my passion project. This is just my opportunity to get together with cool people that are doing really good things and talk story. And generally what ends up happening, which is kind of the goal, is we get to connect the dots. So even with you, which we'll talk a lot about today, I know a lot of the pieces, but I don't know the connection. And so whoever the audience is, I know everybody in our family will be watching this. I don't know the three other people that will, but ultimately it's all storytelling, and everybody that sits in that chair has a friggin' radical story, and yours is super cool. And you're the youngest. I mean, you've done a lot so far, and that's really what I wanted to capture. So, dude, stoked to rock and roll and
yeah,
keep this
man,
going.
this is
Super
awesome.
Cool.
This is also, like you said before, I work around the space, but I've never been
On that side
focused on. Yeah, so it's funny having the headphones on and actually sitting at the table this time
Super
around.
cool. Super cool.
I'm excited.
Rad. Well, as I alluded to, so we're family. So the backdrop here is that we're first cousins. Our moms are sisters. My mom's the oldest, Linda. Yours is twins, Dee Dee and Angie, your mom being Dee Dee. And there's 14 years spread between them. And then there's Aunt Pat and Uncle Steve in between, so the five of them. We had mom in that chair 2 weeks ago. Pretty rad. And I've got like 20 plus years on you. So although we're first cousins, I'm closer in age to your parents than I am to you.
Right.
And you're closer to my kids than me. But that's all good. And ironically, where did you guys all go to college?
Oregon, University of Oregon.
Duck. I got two ducks and you're a duck.
Yeah, which is funny because at dinner the other night, Randy, your wife, asked me, she's like, does it make you happy to think that you kind of started this trend? And I was like, what? Like I had never thought, I never thought about it like that. Like, you know, like I was like, of course I thought about the amazing, beautiful connection that we were all sharing of experiencing Eugene and Oregon together. But never had I thought of it as like, I knocked the first domino down.
Well, and that's something that is really a cool way to look at it because of the generational spread, my kids look to you like a big brother or a big cousin. I know Jackson and Cole have always looked up to you. And it's just super cool to watch how that all kind of filters across our family because we have a super cool, special family. But yeah, they definitely look up to you and that. So I think that definitely resonated with them in their decision-making process.
Yeah. But I mean, that's also like whether it's directly correlated or it's just the natural kind of
the flow
of our family. Like that's also how you and Doug were to me of like, I'm an only child. I didn't have older siblings. Our family, at least my part of the family, both on the workman side, but also on my dad's side, like my family is spread out all over the place. So like, not only did I not have siblings, but like I didn't have cousins around. My aunts and uncles are all in Newport, DC, New York, Wyoming. So like, you know, first like coming down to Newport was always like the closest I was with my actual family, like blood family. We had, you know, amazing, beautiful family in San Francisco, but that was like my parents' best friends and
right.
who became like my aunts and uncles. But coming down here when I was young, it was like you guys were the closest things I had to older brothers, right? And you guys, you know, fucked around with me and threw me in the water. And like that was a very brotherly feeling.
I would do that. I don't think I could do that anymore, unfortunately.
But I didn't have that in any other place, you know? Yeah. So like it's nice to hear and think of, especially with your kids and Jackson and Cole, if they feel that way, then I feel really great about that.
They do,
because
for
that's
sure.
how I felt
100%.
towards you guys.
And it's fun. I mean, and when I spoke to my mom in that chair, like Camp Shoe Line, like she's always been kind of the central feature of her family. And she's like, well, I was the oldest. That was my job. And there was a big age gap. But it's been, that whole story about how we all kind of came out to California by way of my mom kind of starting that. It's another whole cool story, which isn't a different one.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. Why are you in town right now?
I'm in town right now for twofold, but one is my girlfriend is a ballerina. She dances for American Ballet Theater, which is like the biggest, most kind of...
Another underachiever.
Yeah, the kind of elite of the elite.
Yes. Incredible.
Ballet of the world. They're doing Nutcracker down here in Costa Mesa, which for me, I used to live in LA, obviously. When I was living in LA, that provided me and all of us with like a kind of a new chapter of my life where I really got to see all you guys and your kids like monthly almost. And when I left LA 4 years ago, whatever that was, 3 years ago, which was for a new job, but also in the heart of COVID, it kind of went from seeing you guys every month to just like, I haven't been back. So thank God for Paulina. Thank God for her, her dancing here. But also I saw that and I was like, oh, this is I need to get back anyway. Like, this is great.
Well, it's always good to have you here because, like you said, and we'll talk more about your flow of where you've lived and where you are today. Trust me, we'll get into all of that. But yeah, having Paulina, I didn't know if you were going to share, but super impressive. Again, just, hearing her story, she would be another great interview because
Totally.
she's been in that world since she was 16, if I recall. And, at the peak of the peak of what's got to be from both a accomplishment, but also the physical ability to do what she does is staggering. So it'd be really cool to have some dialogue around. It's really amazing.
A radically different
Radically
life than anything I've ever known.
Well, and not to mention, you come from, and we'll talk about that in a second, but like you come and you enjoy more of a gritty urban experience growing up in the city. I think I heard you refer to yourself once before as like a city kid, insert brat, punk, whatever it is. And now you've got this incredibly cultured tip of this, like it's really a big span of you. But I also think that talks a lot about who you are. I mean, your evolution has been equally impressive, and that's why you're here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
We'll get, and I don't want to jump ahead. I want to keep it flowing. But let me ask you this. Here, it's the holidays. It may not look like it because it's hot and beautiful out there right now, but it's the holidays. I've been to a few Christmas parties. I'm sure you have. Have you been to some Christmas parties?
I've been to a few Christmas parties this year. I have a feeling
Anything
I know.
notable?
Yeah, I think I know what you're referring to.
Anything interesting in yours?
So I was at the couple days, I can't remember when, but a couple of days ago, I was at the White House Christmas party.
Hold on, where?
The White House.
The White House? Like the one in Washington, D.C.?
That one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were you doing there?
I was, I used to work there.
Hold on, you used to work at the White House? This is incredible. I had no idea.
This is a great flow. I
Here we
appreciate the
go.
flow. I used to work at the White House. I used to be a staffer for the president and for
Which
First
president?
Lady, the Bidens. The Bidens, to be very clear. Which was a result of me working on their campaign as a senior aide to Dr. Biden, the First Lady. Once we won, there was an offer made to me to shift into a transition role, which is the period between the campaign and the White House is the transition, capital T. It's obviously a period, but it's also a legal entity of itself. So campaign staffer, transition staffer, then within the transition, as we were preparing the administration to get ready on January 20th, another offer was made to me to take a White House role. So worked in the White House and have remained kind of in and around that world, and I'm a former staffer, so they invited a lot of us, kind of the closer staffers they liked, to come back.
So we will dig more into the whole pathway that got you there, and actually more about that in detail because it's incredible. I mean, what an incredible story. But tell us tell us the fun stuff that happened there. Like, what's it like? I can promise you the majority of people that listen to this podcast and the majority of people that you know that aren't from that world have no idea what it's like to be, other than maybe a tourist tour like I've done a few times in the White House. What's it like to go have, I don't know, whiskey in the West Wing?
Yeah. Well, so for the party specifically. For
the party specific Christmas party.
Context first is the job I had in the White House was in the East Wing. It was working for the First Lady. Now, the East Wing is kind of a combination of First Lady policy work, but also the social office. And the social office is the office that designs the parties and the extravagant events for the White House, whether it's bringing in foreign diplomats, whether it's bringing heads of state from other countries and what those events will look like. But from that all the way to these kinds of parties too. That was not my job, but because I was in the East Wing with them, I just got to know them really well and we all became very close. Also, the people that I worked with in the White House and on the Biden campaign that I was super close with, the majority of us have left the White House by now. However, there's a handful left. There's a ton left that I know that I'm buddies with, but there's a handful left, my really good friends. So, with that being said, when we went to this party, Paulina was on tour down in Costa Mesa, so I ended up actually inviting Connor, one of my best childhood friends, like from, we played baseball together when we were 8 years old. And I invited him to be my date to the White House
And I think
party.
you had told me before that he's pretty, like, this is a big friggin' deal for him.
Yeah, which is funny. And back to your point of like most people don't, reminding me that most people haven't seen this world.
No, most of us don't know what happens in the East
Totally.
Wing versus
right,
the West Wing.
Right, and like with Connor, who again is one of my best friends, like Connor is not like a policy wonk. He's not a political nerd, right? Like he's not somebody who's been like spending his whole life hoping to get a tour of the White House. However, even as that being his person, when I first said this to him last year, actually, that, hey, like, would you ever want to go to something like this with me? He fucking lost it. He was like, are you of course, like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard of. So this year when Paulina couldn't go and I said, formally, do you want to be my date to this thing? He was giddy. And that, again,
And where does he live?
He lives in New York. He's from San Francisco.
Got it.
We grew up in San Francisco, but he's from New York. But that's all to say that, like, what was really nice about this party was I got to go there and I got to see my people and be back in the space that obviously is an incredibly powerful and beautiful space, but that for me was also, it was my office. Like, it was pretty normalized. But to be able to bring a friend there who, for him, this was his first time seeing this, and not just seeing the physical space, but also seeing my world within that, seeing me interacting with my friends and my former coworkers and, Biden administration officials, and seeing the look on his face when he was just like, where are we? What is going on? I've known you since we were children and I've never seen this part of you, kind of. But still me feeling like, well, it's just me. Like, it's the same shit. It's just a different place that you kind of didn't have as much access to as I did. Yes, but. So the party itself was like, you go in, you wait in line for Secret Service. Secret Service, they let you in like 2 at a time, like an airport. There's like bomb dogs sniffing you as you walk in. It takes forever. Once you get in, the first lady's office and the social office of like every corner of the White House is just like the most gorgeous Christmas decorations you've ever seen. For people that don't know, because why would you know? The White House has its own carpentry office that's open 24/7 for like this sole purpose. Like if the first lady says, like when I was working there, I remember it was the day before Valentine's Day. And we realized very last moment that like we didn't have any like things, or the first lady realized she didn't have anything planned for Valentine's Day. So at like 10 p.m., we called it
24/7. What's it? What
it's
is
like
it?
it's a carpentry. It's like it's
they can do anything.
They can do anything. And so I do remember
24/7.
like before Valentine's.
I want one of those.
So like 10 p.m. Valentine's Day, the first lady's like, I want a dozen custom massive hearts that we put on the north lawn of the White House by the morning. And we're all like, we're not okay. And then of course we show up to work the next morning and like the most beautiful custom 12 by 12 hearts painted, cut out, messages painted are like covering the White House. That was like what this Christmas party was, but it was like every inch, every room, trees, messaging, paintings, cutouts of like the dogs and the cats and presents, just gorgeous. And you walk around and you see all the decorations and you're kind of surrounded by a mix of like actually important people, but also like, big rich donors who they invited to, maintain relationships with, and also former staff and people like me. And then, huge, like any other kind of fancy.
It's a very
gala.
elaborate, big event, and with some big hitters.
Yeah, it's a fancy holiday office party.
Yeah.
In an insane space.
In an insane space. But for the non-initiated, like the rest of us, it would be like a once in a lifetime, like for Connor.
Yeah.
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity for most people to go, this is what it's like to have a Christmas party in the White House.
Right. And instead of rubbing shoulders with like your CEO, you're rubbing shoulders with the vice president or, the secretary of education or the head of the DNC, or celebrities. There's a ton of celebrities there. And of course, the president comes out and gives a speech. But because it's like a room of predominantly kind of like inner circle people, it's not a very political speech. It's just kind of like, hey, how are you? Nice to see you guys kind of thing.
A little less than formal.
Yeah. And all you can drink champagne and eggnog and stuff like that. But the event itself is pretty short. It's like 2 or 3 hours. And then they kind of kicked everybody out.
And then the fun began.
They kicked everybody out. And one of my best friends from that time of my life is named Adam Schultz, who's the head White House the president's photographer. So he's one of the few staff who, 24/7 is on the president's hip, whether he's,
Wow.
Reading memos in the Oval or whether he's on a secret train through Ukraine to meet with Zelensky. Like Adam is there snapping photos. And
As a photographer, where do you go from there?
you don't, right?
That's it.
Well, I mean, that's what's so funny is like for a lot of us, the White House is like, it's certainly the pinnacle from like a, it's definitely the pinnacle of like political work. Not necessarily the place where you can have the most impact, right? But like in terms of like how high an elite can you get, how braggadocious can you be? Like there's nowhere higher than the White House.
I was the president's photographer.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, but like we could also like, me now. I don't work for the White House. I don't work for the president. But I have all these other jobs that I love and that I feel amazing about and that are more exciting to me in certain ways. If you're a political photographer, like there is nothing.
There's nowhere to
nothing.
go.
So for him, when we all started leaving, he was like, "I'll see you guys later." Like I'm not going fucking anywhere. So, he grabbed me and said, "No, like, we're not." When they kicked everybody out of the party, he said, "We're staying." And so I got to grab Connor and say, "We're staying," and we ended up, staying there and kind of closing the place out with other staff. And then Adam's office is in the West Wing. It's the photographer's office in the West Wing. So we walked. Now the White House is like empty, and we get to walk Connor around. We got to show him the Oval. We got to show him, where the Situation Room is.
That's incredible.
And then we end up going into Adam's office, which is he's the photographer, so his office is covered in like literally every inch is covered in prints in a very disorganized way. What looks to me as disorganized, of like photos from every event the president's ever done, and it's crazy. And it makes perfect sense knowing where you are. You're like, I am in the White House photographer's office in the West Wing. I understand what I'm looking at. However, like it's a room where if you walked into that room and it was anywhere else, if that was a hotel room or, some place in some random suburban basement, like the Secret Service would have showed up instantly. And been like,
it's like a beautiful mind, right?
That's literally what I said when I showed up there. So it's like insane. But because you're there, it's incredible. And, Connor walked in and was just like, this is ridiculous. And so we ended up, me, Adam, and Connor just sitting in the West Wing, kind of sucking down bourbon. But it was just great. We sat in the West Wing and drank bourbon and kind of shared war stories, but also it was more of just I kind of sat back like Adam. That Adam's job is insane.
How big is the West Wing?
Like
when you say the West Wing, it's not like the Oval. We know the Oval.
Oval is one room within the West Wing.
West Wing's big. I mean, we've all seen it on TV. That's probably the extent of it.
It's not enormous. Yeah, I mean, it's you've got the West Wing. You've got the Oval, and you have kind of a handful of other meeting rooms, like the cabinet room is in there where cabinet secretaries come and meet each other for the cabinet meetings. And you have a couple of conference rooms. The president's senior advisors work in there. The communications department for the president work in there. And then underground, there's like a dining hall, photography office, and a few other things. But it's not very big.
But so you and Connor and a couple people sat around in the West Wing after the Christmas party and got to have drinks.
Got to have drinks and hang out.
That's
and then we left probably 2 hours in. And
most of us don't get that opportunity. That was when you told me that story the other night. That's when I'm like, all right, hey, I'm going to get you in the chair because you were at the top or in my list because of your life experience and work experience. But when you're like, oh, guess where I was for Christmas? Like it's hard to top. Super cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
We're going to get deeper into the whole political thing because obviously that is a big part of your life and it's been evolving in different ways. But let's talk about like the beginning. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned San Francisco. Tell us, you grew up in San Francisco. Your dad grew up in San Francisco.
Dad's from New York.
Oh, he's from New York.
Yeah, he's a New Yorker.
I just know him from his like deadhead times in the city.
Yeah, I mean, I bet if you said that to him, he would be like, "I was never a deadhead," because I don't think he. But he moved there and. I don't know if it was 69, if it was right after 60, but he moved there early. And I mean, I'm born and raised in San Francisco, like you said, like city kid. That's kind of still, if a buddy of mine a couple months ago, we're having a similar conversation. He's like, how would you describe yourself? Which I'd never been asked. And the first thing that came to mind was like, well, at my core, it's just like a city kid. And like, I don't, to me, that just means like everything that comes with the experience of kind of getting the social education that is gifted upon you when you grow up in a place like that.
Yeah. Well, and you've followed that. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to get back to San Francisco
Sure.
in a minute, but where are you now? Just kind of walk us through where you've been, and it'll kind of reinforce that you've stayed with that kind of urban focus.
Yeah, for the most, I mean, I'm in New York City
Other
now.
than Eugene, Oregon.
And Wilmington, Delaware, I was there for a while too for Biden campaign. But I'm in New York City. I'm on the Lower East Side now. I was in D.C. before New York, Delaware briefly for a campaign stint before that, Los Angeles for many years before that, obviously San Francisco before that. For me, it's not that I think a city is better than it's not about better or worse. Just for me, it's where I'm the most comfortable and just where I'm just happy. I'm attracted to chaos. I'm comfortable in chaos. I like congestion. I like options. I like having the ability to get lost within chaos. And I also, for me, I'm an only child. It's very necessary and therapeutic for me to be alone a lot of the time, but have solitude. I really value and need solitude. And while some people spend a lot of their alone time out in the ocean or out hiking or whatever, for me, my ocean is like deep Jackson Heights, where I feel like I'm in another country, right? Like, and just being there alone and just wandering and tasting and smelling and eating and, going to shops and restaurants. And just, to me, that's what is so exciting about a city, is it can bring the world to you.
Well, it's funny we're sitting here because there's been all these noises. There was a truck out there. For you, that's like you probably sleep better with all that kind of
100%.
All that noise, where the rest was like, no, we need to be quiet. We're filming.
Well, it's funny. My apartment in New York, which is on the Lower East Side, which is like one of the kind of craziest in like the terms of just noise and nonsense in Manhattan. My apartment is like very blocked off from a lot of the noise because I have all these other buildings around me, and I've had friends comment on that and like Pauline, I'm like, oh, it's so quiet, it's amazing. And for me, I'm like, I really prefer there was more noise. Like the kind of the quietness is almost is weird for me.
It's really interesting because like when you talk to like Juliet, my sister-in-law, who was in New York for a very long time, or my dad that grew up there, and it's so different for someone like me that's grown up in suburbia,
right?
Where it's just everything about it's different.
Yeah.
But and I think, again, just connecting the dots, it seems like all the cities you've chosen for the most part, where you are today, what you like, kind of your self-description shines a big light on it. And you talked about food, and we'll get into that because I know that's another big part of it. And when you're in a suburb, your food's a little more boring perhaps. And when you're in a super tight urban environment, especially when you're surrounded by places like when you were living in Koreatown and in LA, like food is everywhere.
Food's everywhere.
Everything you can imagine, right? And so that's got to be both the catalyst and also something like you long and are drawn towards.
I mean, it's a huge part of. I mean, like I would even say like Newport or this area. There's incredible food in Newport. So for me, it's like it's not even about that suburban spaces are lacking that. They aren't. It's just not as accessible. You have to go drive there, or you have to make a plan to get it, right? Which is fine. But to me, that's a very radically different experience than saying like I'm gonna take a 5-minute walk and like pass every possible cuisine I could possibly want, and like out of the 30 restaurants I'm walking by, 6 of those are actually like world star level, like insane, like just as good as I might get in Thailand or something, right? Like that's so a lot of, again, it's not just about the optionality, but it's about the accessibility that a city gives you also. I think that's where actually out of all the cities I've lived in, DC was the hardest for me to live in. I loved it. It was a beautiful city and it was a very calm city, but it was a very calm city. Like that was a part of it that was hard for me. I felt like I've said before that I feel like DC is like a perfect city for people who've never lived in a city before. It kind of has some food, and it's got some bars, it's got some nightlife, and it's beautiful. It's got public spaces, amazing museums. But like if you're looking for anything a little deeper,
yeah, it's interesting because I would not have thought about that except for the fact that I've got friends that own stores and live there, and I've spent a fair bit of time with them, and I love the city, but they tell the story because their businesses they've opened in what were those areas that were decimated by the riots 30 some odd years ago. And so a lot of what was probably the more city-esque went away after all those big riots. And when it came back in a more gentrified way. I think that's probably part of it, but I'm not a historian. And
DC is one of the most segregated cities in the country, right? Like literally. And so, I think there's all like me saying, oh, it's a city for people who've never lived. Like that's also coming from a very privileged state of like, there are black and brown families that have lived there for generations and generations, where like it is an extreme urban existence, but in a different way than I would define, in a different experience than I've had.
It's really interesting. But let's take it all back because we're talking urban. Let's go back to your roots, San Francisco, one of the most amazing cities in the US, but it's having its day, and not necessarily in a good way. But what was it like growing up there? You played sports. Your dad's a teacher. Your parents are amazing. So let's talk a bit about growing up, and you said it, as a single child in the city with parents that are very involved in different parts of the city.
Super involved, yeah.
And let's talk about your folks and then what it was like growing up in the city. And then at the end, I'd love to get your thoughts on where the city is today and what it looks like.
I am so grateful. Grateful is not, I don't know the word for it. Like I am just, the fact that I got to have that childhood experience of growing there in that physical place, I value that. I'm so lucky.
It really shaped you, huh?
It really shaped me. And I think part of that, of course, is the city itself, but it's also the environment I was in, which is, like you said, my dad is a lifelong educator, artist, activist. My mom is also a lifelong activist. She, has run nonprofits her entire career, Planned Parenthood, beautifying city and urban spaces. Now she's a public policy consultant for, a bunch of different organizations in the city. But, the family, like I said, because our blood family, however you want to say it, was so spread out, what my family really became, at least in San Francisco, was this community of my parents' best friends who were also very similar to my parents. They were artists, they were activists, they were educators, they were journalists and painters, and they were opinionated on the world and on politics and on art and not in like a pretentious way. It was just like that's what the world was. And and like with that, it wasn't, I think of it as San Francisco, but it was that community. It's like when I was 5 years old, I was marching into protests with my parents, and like part of that was because of the nature of San Francisco, but like that was our community. It was like, that was just what I knew. And so to me, San Francisco always was and is hyper political, hyper creative, obviously physically beautiful, and also just like hyper experimental and weird and funky and dirty in the best ways. And like that to me is how I always see San Francisco, is kind of through the lens of that community that we had. Now San Francisco is very tech driven, as is the whole Bay Area. Like you said, there's a lot of, I think there's debate to be had whether some of the narratives are accurate or not, but a lot of them are. I think that some of them are fair, at least. I think cities change, places change. That's the natural state of urban environments, or everywhere. Like nothing will ever stay the same. There will always be a natural metamorphosis. I just think that San Francisco had that evolution or change on a fast track because
super magnified.
Of tech. It was magnified,
well,
and
tech. You throw in COVID and the nature of all of those things. Right?
Yeah, and just a lot of places have these, but like I said, like I picture San Francisco. To me, San Francisco is lower middle income people making art, having political discussions, eating good food. Like being funky and weird. Like that to me is what San Francisco is, and it always will be. Whether that's what people moving to San Francisco now see it as, I don't know, right? But that to me will always be what San Francisco is. So anyway, like that really shaped me. Like even going to Eugene and going to Oregon, where when I went to Oregon, I went to study business, and like I didn't think about politics or social impact work and I started studying business, and I was doing terribly, and I wasn't interested in it. And like, again, not to knock anybody who does that, like I work in business now. Like it was just like at that time, it wasn't a path. And then all of a sudden I just had this realization of like, well, I'm good. I like politics. I know a lot about it. It interests me. And I switched majors, and all of a sudden, like I started crushing it in college. And that's what kind of started me on this political path. But again, to me, a lot, that all came from growing up in San Francisco.
So let me ask you that, and we'll get back to that. Thank you for that. Just to hit on it, because you just brought it up. So you changed your major, not because you said, I want to be back into politics, but you're like, I'm not really doing that well. I'm not really digging it.
Yeah.
Is that what made you stop and go, okay, well, what do I really want to do? Is that how it happened, or?
Yeah, it was like I went to we're Jewish, but I went to a Catholic, pretty like hardcore sports factory, pretty kind of elite and frankly pretty wealthy high school in San Francisco. And so a lot of my best friends, who are still very good friends of mine, like a lot of them come from like Christian, business-centric, pretty rich and like show-offy rich families. And again, that's great. It just was different than my unit, my family. And so when we all started to graduate, you know, I never thought about, I was just like, yeah, I'm going to study business. Like that's what everybody does. Like I just never thought about it. I just didn't. And because everybody else is doing that. And yeah, I mean, it took a term or two I remember sitting in my first class my first business class, BA 101, and just being like, oh man, like this is what it's going to be like, okay, I don't know if this is interesting.
So you picked up on it that quickly.
Yeah, and it was a combination of like I wasn't interested in it, and I was doing really badly. Like I was partying a lot. It wasn't just that. I was in college. I was at a state school. Like I was having fun, but taking classes that I just felt like I had no interest in certainly didn't help.
We all tend to do better if we're passionate about something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because you want to be spending your time doing it. You're not just being force fed and feel like you're obligated to go do
totally.
it. Right?
And and there was, to answer your question, all those things were part of the decision to like, well, maybe I should start taking classes that I'm more interested in. But it was also, frankly, it was like the timing of this was right when the Trump and Hillary election started to come up, right? It was like right after Trump announced, or was about to announce. And so it wasn't just my own kind of personal, what am I good at? What do I want to do? Oh, I took a political science class and I did pretty well. Maybe I should think more about that. Oh, like it was also like,
you felt compelled?
I was just on a personal level outside of school becoming more engaged, right? And more aware and spending more and more of my time reading and involving myself and engaging. And again, I didn't realize that in the moment, because to me, like that was the world I came from. It was like, you engage. When politics arise and you smell the scent of fascism in the air, like you stand up,
Yeah.
And so I think just the timing of like that, Trump basically, and frankly Bernie, like those two figures are coming.
They lit a fire under you?
Yeah, or the combination of becoming more aware of the world, engaged in the world around me, while also becoming more aware of what I liked and didn't like in academia, but also what I was good at. Like, it wasn't just that I liked the political science and the applied economics or urban economics classes more. It's like I did really fucking well in them. Like I crushed them. And I was going from like I couldn't stand the idea from studying for a test to like spending 4 days in a row in the library, leaving parties to go to the library.
Listen, if I can just stop right there and shine a light. If there is a testimonial for what college is supposed to do, that's it. Right? College is supposed to expose our youth to what they love and what they hate, and to fire them up to go down a path that maybe they didn't think that was the path they were going to go on. Just expose them to people and thoughts and with an end game of ending up where you're supposed to be, which is doing something you really love, you're really passionate about. And that goes back to that adage, whether you believe it or not, if you do something every day that you love, you never work a day in your life. Now that doesn't work for me, because my what was the test that we took in high school? Basically an skills aptitude. Well, I put on there, I want to be, working hard. I want to be outdoors. And it came back, said, Mark, you need to be a pool cleaner or a grave digger. I kid you not. And then I went down the path of marine science and art
Right.
because I was passionate about it. I did really good. I would get captivated in a project and it'd be 2 a.m. and I was like,
Right.
wow.
Yeah.
Now I don't use those in my career, but I really got a lot out of the college experience because I was doing something that I was passionate about and engaged in, and it got me thinking differently.
Totally.
But a lot of people don't,
Totally.
right? A lot of people are like, my dad says I need to get a business degree, or I'm going to be an
Totally.
attorney or a doctor or whatever. So I just wanted to give you big props. Like that's where we hope our kids end up.
Well, and also I'll just add to that, like, I don't do a ton of this, but like I'll speak to some like, high school classes or like middle schoolers about my career or about, if they're interested in politics.
It's because you have an invitation to the White House. You've got some cred.
Well, let's say it's a bunch of, like kind of like civics nerds like me who like we want to know about how you, like, I've spoken to classes like that. And like a question that is like constant among these kids, whether they're 12 years old or 16 or whatever, is like, what if what do I do if I don't know what I want to do? Basically, like, is that okay to go to college and like not really know yet? And to me, the answer is like, please have no fucking idea what you want to do. Like that's what the best thing you can hope for is to go into an experience like that with absolutely no fucking idea what you want, and then you can find it. And guess what? Like maybe you even don't find it in college, but you've had all these tastes and you've been able to experience all these things, and like it will come. Like you will find what interests you. But I think the most dangerous version of that is the opposite, which is like you said, is to be 14 and have had some mission or direction or something drilled into your head
that you must be.
And maybe you're lucky, right? Maybe you're like Paulina, where it's like that actually happens to completely match. Like all I want to do is dance. But if it's like, so that is rare. Also, that is very rare. I think exception
For people that have it, because I was that person that was like,
right.
I
Right.
said, I got degrees that have nothing to do with what I do in business.
Right.
They gave me a great education. I worked super hard,
Right.
but I did really well once I fell into those.
Right.
But I also look at like cousin Matthew. So my nephew,
Right.
he got a soldering iron he wanted to solder when he was like 4 years old, and he's working at Intel building chips. That was his lane from
Totally.
day one. Loves it, passionate about it. Not me.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's more just like, do not allow that to be a concern of yours.
Yeah,
like,
it's a great one.
It'll
and
come.
hopefully parents buy into that.
Yeah,
right.
it'll come.
Because sometimes it's top down.
Well, and also again, like, look at me. I mean, like, I went to a state school. It was not the greatest school in the country. It was an average state school. There was a lot of partying. There was a lot of drinking. I played rugby there. Like
Hold on, are my kids partying a lot? Is that what you're saying?
probably, but that's a good thing. They're doing, they're doing their thing.
Oh, I've been to some of those parties.
Yeah. But I guess my point is like, I was not, even once I found my thing, it wasn't like, all right, screw everything else. I am just a bookworm now. It was like, I allowed myself to enjoy myself. And like, thank God for that. Like, I don't know if I'd be where I am now if I hadn't had also had that ability to say like, I have the things I care about and I have the things that I have fun with, and sometimes they cross and sometimes they don't, and I'm going to do all of it.
Work hard, play hard,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
No. The world's just like moving from city to city, there's a lot out there. And getting out there and traveling a lot and seeing a lot and experiencing a lot of things. And sometimes you're like, I never need to do that again. And you're like, holy moly, I didn't even know this existed. I want to go do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because talk real quickly, again, I love your story. You mentioned that your school was like a sports factory.
Yeah.
And you played 2 sports at the elite high school level. What did you play?
I played football and baseball for like one of the top schools in the state in California, basically. Captained both teams. It's so funny.
And we were always like so proud of you, and we were all expecting you to go to some D1 school on a scholarship type of thing.
That was my goal. Like even, since football came up in high school, I didn't start playing football until high school. But, my dad was a football player. He played college D1 ball. Like,
You know what? I never knew that.
Played at Harvard.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. He
See,
only played.
that is why we're here.
Yeah.
Those are the dots that I had no idea.
Yeah. He only played a couple
Doesn't matter.
years, but he stopped. But yeah, no.
He was at Harvard, and he played D1 ball.
Oh, yeah. Freak athlete.
I like him
Yeah.
even. Dan, I love you
Yeah.
a little bit more now.
No, badass.
Love that. You would never know. He's the softest spoken, nicest guy in the
He
whole
was a
world.
lineman.
Really?
Yeah, it's like 5'9" lineman.
Dang. I had no idea.
But no, I mean, the goal which again, I think is one of the reasons I got to college and had never thought about what major I wanted. Because up until then, from the age of 5 to 18, kind of like, or 17, like Division I baseball was like it. And the reality was, I've talked about kind of with Gianni, like how I felt about it was like, I'm either going to go full speed ahead with this. Like it's D1 or nothing.
On or off.
Yeah.
I have
no ability to go, I'm not going to fucking do club. Like that's not happening. Like I'm committing to this thing 1,000%, or I actually have no interest in it. And I'm going to like go explore.
So in hindsight, it was probably fairly heartbreaking because you were team captain, like again,
Totally.
elite, and everybody thought it was kind of a foregone conclusion. And we're like,
the offers just didn't come.
Yeah.
Like they just didn't come.
Now,
and it was,
thinking about that, do you think it would have changed anything with where you are today had you been playing D1 ball?
1,000%. Not just, everything. My, like Oregon wasn't just great because I got to find my interest in politics. It was great because it was Eugene. It was like a crazy fucking place where, snowboarding was 1 hour this way. The beach was an hour this way. Portland was 1 hour that way. It was like basically like it was Oregon, but it was a ton of a lot of my best friends now are from Southern California because for some reason a ton of Southern California kids go to Oregon. So like Oregon was also just an opportunity for me to like build this incredible another place where I built an amazing community. And so yeah, no, I don't think I would be, my life would be completely different if I played a sport in college, whether it was at Oregon or
It's
or
that
somewhere.
sliding doors thing.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
I tell Reef, my youngest, the story all the time, but it's this like Chinese proverb thing, and it's like, oh, my cow got stolen. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, they brought it back and they brought another one.
Yeah.
Okay. Like you just never know where life's going to take you, and you just kind of have to roll with it. I mean, you can make a lot of things happen, but there's some things you're like, had I not been, like when I re-met Randy, my wife, like had I not gone to the bar on a date that night, would we end up where we are today?
Right.
You never know. So one would like to think that it all happened for a reason, because where you are today is pretty rad.
And just not to cut you, but like
No.
the thing I would add to that is like, I'm curious how you feel about this in your work. Like, something I feel very strongly about is like how much sports prepared me for the professional world. Not just sports, like team sports, but also like high level, the ability to be coached and to learn and to take constructive criticism and not take things personally and to like get beaten into the ground and like get back up. Everything. But like that to me is like to this day, I feel like I can be in the workplace and I can talk to somebody and I can tell like that person never played a sport or like they never played a team sport. Like there's professional skills or social skills that you need in the professional world to succeed that I think are so. I'm just so lucky that like sports gave me that.
Yeah.
And also, I captained every team I ever played on. Like, I think there's a reason that my career has kind of like I've ended up in very senior advisory roles to massive teams. My jobs have always been about advising the principal, liaising between the principal and the rest of the team and staff. I think all of that came from a comfort level that was built in
1,000,000% agree with you on that.
100%.
And I had never thought about that before attached to you, nor have I reflected on it for me, because I didn't play team sports for that long.
Right.
I was never elite. I didn't get good at stuff till I started doing my solo stuff, but the things that I think the commonalities are discipline, consistency, grit, tenacity. The difference is I was never coached at an elite level. I share this story all the time. I say it to the kids, I say it at work, but I always say, you will remember your best coach and your worst coach, your best teacher, whatever it is, mentor, teacher, coach, whatever it is. And then you have a choice. And I always suggest people emulate your best coach or teacher and, use this one as fodder for how not to interact with people, so you learn just as much from both. Everybody in the middle is kind of vanilla, right? I say this quote all the time. I've said it on here. Cole's like, yeah, I've heard this before. But it's so important to be coachable and to be comfortable communicating with others. So I would, everything you just said, I think is just dead nuts on. Your ability early on to get all that leadership experience, being a liaison, being coachable, and understanding what does coachable mean. I think back on my team members, the best, oftentimes the ones that are the best are the ones that are like, give me feedback. I want to hear. I want criticism. Please give it to me in a way that I can consume it without feeling terrible. But like some people, they never think that they don't think there's anything that they could do any better.
Right.
So all of that comes from I think you just nailed it. I really do.
So much of good coaching is really just about honesty. It's like, can you be honest with somebody, good or bad?
But there's a requirement to be able to present things in a way that is received in a way that is beneficial, right? Like
Totally.
my worst coach, he went on to be Olympic coach.
Right.
He's not that he's not a good coach. Right. He was a terrible coach for me. He was a dick.
Yeah.
And, as a result, I hated the sport. A good coach, hopefully, potentially could have helped me fall in love with the sport.
Right.
I wasn't that bad. That guy he did not know how to lead me.
Totally.
As a kid.
Yeah. It's a shame. I mean, that was, my high school, which again was like, still is one of the kind of like athletic elite institutions of California, specifically Northern California.
What's the name of that school?
St. Ignatius College Preparatory. Like kind of, there was SI, there was us, there was Bellarmine, there was all these just massive big hitters.
Schools.
What's a shame is like the worst coach that I ever had. That, to your point, like I had 1,000 coaches in every sport. I only remember a couple of them, and I know one of my worst coaches I ever had was the St. Ignatius varsity baseball coach. Like he was just horrible, and not much to say beyond to your point of like that's what sticks in my head, right? Like it isn't the like, oh, they were great. It was like, no, that guy was horrendous, and it's a shame that he's the one I have to remember because I'm sure there's a dozen fantastic coaches that I had that just I'm not remembering, but
they weren't fantastic enough.
His inability to lead and to coach and to message was awful. But yeah, I can't.
And that translates to work every day, and that's what I talk about with my team. Like, be a great leader. Like some people don't understand what that is, so we have to help them there. We can provide coaching. That's why I'm passionate about providing coaches to our leaders because not everybody's had a coach. Or maybe they had bad coaches or bad example role models. So I'm a huge believer in providing that. And that's why I use a coach every day. And so whenever people say, oh, I don't need it, I'm like, show me a professional athlete that doesn't have a coach. Yeah. And,
Well, and also like, I haven't seen you in the zone at work, but like I have a sense for what you are at work, which is like you continue to be very much yourself.
Yeah.
And like, that's, how I am too. Like there is no separation in personality or character when I am emailing or in a meeting versus when I'm here. And I think a lot of that comes from the coaching as well. Like, but also, I also think that's been one of the, I'm kind of going like this, but like back into the political conversation, the political career conversation, I rised up, if that's the right way to say it, like pretty quickly in my career in this world of like democratic politics. And like where I was unique in that beyond just kind of the pacing was that like democratic politics is filled with a lot of people who like have spent their entire lives like trying to get into democratic politics. Like they shaped their lives to be these people that are often like hyper vanilla and curated and careful, and therefore when you end up at these higher levels of this industry, and that's, politics is still an industry, it's a lot of very similar molds.
So I'm guessing a lot of those people don't like you because you just showed up and blowed up.
I think a lot of people
don't hold me accountable to my grammar.
I think a lot of people, I think there's probably a lot of people who didn't like me, but I think a lot of it was like not like jealousy, but it was kind of like, wait a second,
surprise.
Like, yeah, like how the fuck. I thought I had to do it like this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the reason that I moved so quickly was, frankly, like people fucking liked me. Like it was just about people like I could work with people, and I wasn't, a robot, and that was rare in that world, especially when you're working with like hyper powerful, super powerful global leaders. People are very mechanical, and I came in and I was like, I can be serious and good at this and get the work done, and like be myself and like take it or leave it. And like very quickly, I think people saw that and they liked it.
It's endearing.
It's endearing. It's valuable. If
Totally.
you don't have people like that on your team, like that is a very helpful thing to have.
And to have the EQ to recognize that is super potent. Like it's a strong skill, and maybe a stronger skill to understand that that's how it works. Because as you said, a lot of people think you have to do it this way, and you're like, no. Just be a good person, work hard, have the right, know how to read a room, know how to talk to the right people, and get your shit done on time, and be impressive.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be impressive in a bullshit way. Be impressive in a authentic way.
Totally.
And a lot of good things come from it. But those are skill sets that are built all the way back from St. Ignatius school. Like
100%.
Those are all. If someone dropped you in there and you hadn't had that kind of pathway to where you are, like you would hit the ground going, okay, but you had it seems like a very natural tendency within that.
But even before, I mean, get back to the family, like that's who, my mom, my mom is direct as fuck. Like she, like she is opinionated and she is, but she's also brilliant. My dad is brilliant, right? My dad, like what I get from my dad, I think is like, versus my mom is like, my dad is a genius. My dad though, like he will not speak unless he has something to say, right? He is not speaking just to speak. Like he comes when he's ready to say what he wants to say because he has something to say. And I think like that's another piece of this is like, it's not about bullshit. Everybody bullshits, but it's not about filling the room with air. It's not about talking to be heard. It's about like being likable, adding quality ideas and quality conversations, and not feeling like you have to be the one that's being heard all the time. I think it's all part of that same puzzle, and like I think that's that's a very workman thing. We haven't even talked about your dad. Like I feel like your dad is
unbelievable,
and like I never really had a grandfather like in my life, right? Like your dad has like been my grandfather, and so like there's so much I've gotten from him too that like I would have never had.
Well, listen, our family, and so my mom was just here. My dad will be here next week. That's the genesis. Those two are the genesis for this whole thing. You remember I wanted to interview who I called Gigi, but Grandma. My brother Doug interviewed her, so we have that on tape. We're going to see what we can do to edit that into something consumable. But we're blessed with family. Our parents have both been married forever.
Forever, yeah.
That's powerful. My parents are both incredibly hardworking, great role models, super smart. You just said the same thing about yours. Like all of those things, proximity is power, the ability to, if you look back over your life, like a gratitude, like, fuck am I grateful in 800 ways to be where I am today because of them and what they've created. And I think you're in a very similar boat. All of these things compound to give you, when that opportunity knocks, you're ready to jump. Mm-hmm. Because if you hadn't been able to go to that school and you hadn't had that coaching experience or the team captains or like all those things, back to the sliding doors, who knows where Charlie would be today?
No clue. Yeah.
Same thing for me. Who knows? Had my parents not stayed together. You look at all the things that happen in the world.
Yep.
Super grateful.
Yeah.
I love this, Charlie. Like you're connecting dots for me big time right now. Before we jump full blown back into politics, which is kind of the next, not just politics, but the path and where you are. Talk about food real quick, because that comes back into where you are today. But talk about like, is it just based on what you talked about? Living in cities, walking past all these restaurants, going to eat wherever you want.
But it's also my dad, yes to all of that. But my dad also being a central part of that, which was like, it's become the older I get, the more clear it becomes to me how similar to my dad I am. In the main way is just like how I think I choose to experience the world around me, which is like, I just want to be a blanket. Like, I just want to walk through it and witness it. I want it to be like I'm walking through Times Square and I'm just like taking in all the lights and all the smells and craziness. And I think that's very much what I got from my dad, specifically around food, which was like, I remember like my dad was a teacher, still is a teacher at the school I went to elementary and middle school at. But like, I had the incredible luck of like spending 10 years at the same school as my dad. We would drive to school together every day, right? And that's a whole other conversation.
Was that ever
Like,
hard? I just got to ask.
No.
It was always easy.
No, it was so easy.
That's rad. Because I worked with my dad for 20 years, and
Yeah.
it was not easy.
No, it was easy. I mean, it was like maybe it would have been harder if my dad was like my 5th grade teacher.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't. He was an arts and music teacher. He was the music teacher, but like that's an art for the whole school. With a very specific style of teaching. I would say that was amazing. But no, it was like, and he had his own room, and like I would be able to go down and stop by and say hi. And I also, frankly, I got to get away with shit. Like, I could probably get away with stuff that other people couldn't, because they'd be like, fuck, it's Dan's kid, like some of my earliest memories are like, it's not school. It's like driving to Clement Street with my dad after school to go pick up a pork bun and like go into like literally the cheapest Chinese butcher in the city and like see what they had. And then, like that was daily. And like, that was also how that's a reflection of how my dad still shops and grocery shops today, which is how I grocery shop, which is, it's not like I'm going to cook this thing. I'm going to go out shopping for these ingredients. It's like, I'm going to go out shopping. I'm going to find the fucking coolest, most interesting stuff. I'm going to bring it home. Okay. Now I'm home. Like, what do I cook? Right. And so
I love that, by the way. And that is a skill that I do not possess whatsoever. Yeah, I love people that do.
Yeah, and I think that is like, it's both the reaction, but it's also it causes, and it's the reaction to like a style of cooking that is hyper creative. It forces you to learn. It forces you to like, or allows you not to be stuck in specific recipes and to experiment.
I got to get together with my brother-in-law, Robert Stein, Bobby Stein, because he can do that. Like, we'll think we have nothing in the fridge, and he'll make a gourmet meal out of saltine crackers and a can of tomato sauce. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like my dad.
I can't do it.
So, I mean, that to me, like, it was San Francisco. It was the combination of being with a parent like that, which was, constantly taking me out to the hole in the wall taco shops in the Mission and the dim sum places in Chinatown or Clement Street or the Russian markets in the outer Richmond or like whatever, and just like trying things, right? And it was never... These places all, if a place had an A health rating, we probably weren't going there,
right,
but not because we were searching for that. It was
looking
just
for
like
authentic, local, surprising,
stuff.
Interesting.
So I think that's just kind of, that started it wasn't even like a love. It was just like, that's what I thought of as food. It was like interesting, creative stuff.
Well, I would always, like whenever your folks, and again, going back to Camp Shoe Line, like your folks would always come stay at my parents' house. And your dad and my dad would always cook, because my dad's got that same kind of cooking gene. My mom does too. I got a lot from them. I did not get that. My brother did, and his kids did. But yeah, your dad and my dad would always cook, and gourmet, fantastic, all the time.
And that's shaped like everywhere I've lived, besides DC, frankly, because that was so immediate. Like you said, Koreatown in Los Angeles. Like, I moved to Koreatown because of the food.
That's wild.
Right? Like, I liked it there because it was incredible and vibrant and so different than the rest of LA. But like, it was also because like I was like, this is a insane plethora of culinary options, and like I'm gonna get lost in this.
Well, what an incredible opportunity. And teaser, this comes back to you, but like the fact that you've been able to, again, teaser, merge politics, world engagement, and food in the super impressive. We're not going to talk about that yet, but what an amazing thing to happen.
Yeah.
But let's do this. We're going to jump right into the politics side of it. I don't know how you got it, but your first, again, I knew you grew up in San Francisco. You talked a lot about our family and your family being very active. But you got your first job that I know, first real job that kind of exposed you to big hitters in the political realm. You were driving and kind of, why don't you talk about that and who that was? Because that was a big deal.
Yeah, so my first like big political job / first job out of college was I was a staffer for Senator Dianne Feinstein. The way I got that was a combination of luck and fortunate random connections, which was, I actually remember I was out at the bars or something in Eugene. It was senior year.
Nobody does that.
Yeah, it was senior year, so I was 21 or whatever. And there was a buddy of mine who I used to play travel ball baseball with, which again, connecting to the sports, like we were not still really friends, but he knew what I was interested in. He was just this guy he now works for like runs LeBron James media company. Like he's also a killer. But I remember him texting me, "Hey, my mom just told me that like a staff assistant spot in Senator Feinstein's office just opened. Just wanted to let you know, like, here's the intake in email if you want to send them stuff." And I literally ran home from the bars, wrote up a cover letter, and like fired it off. Next morning or something, you know, I called my mom and dad, I'm sure. My mom used to work with somebody who used to be like a pretty senior aide in her state, in the Senator's state office. So I think that he was able to put in a word for me.
Well, and not everybody probably knows. Dianne Feinstein, if I recall correctly, was born in San Francisco. Mayor of San Francisco?
So I was going to get to that, which is, so the job itself, I'll also say her state director at the time was Sean Ellsburn. Sean Ellsburn was a power player from St. Ignatius. So like it really helped
school.
that I made sure I included on my resume. Like he was like the youngest board of supervisor in the history of San Francisco turned state director for Feinstein. So Feinstein, for folks listening, I'm sure like most people know the name, maybe know she was this, RIP, senior serving senator of California.
Yeah, passed earlier this year, right?
Yeah. She, has been the senator, I think, since the early 90s, I think. Before she was a senator, she was the mayor of San Francisco. That was a result of, she was on the board of supervisors when Harvey Milk was assassinated. The same day that Harvey Milk was assassinated, Mayor Moscone at the time was assassinated. That same day, if you've ever seen Milk, like that's what it's about. She then basically was assigned to be mayor or appointed to be mayor as a result of those assassinations. She, like you said, was a...
I never knew that part of the story. I had never put that
together. She, like me, was a city kid. She grew up in the city. And so, long story short, like she is just deeply tied to San Francisco on a personal level, on a career level, on a political level. And even when she was in the Senate, representing all of California, decades after she was mayor of San Francisco, she still considered herself like mayor. Like San Francisco was still her baby. She still cared deeply for it, so much so that I'll get into that in a sec. So the job that they were looking for was the staff assistant. Now, the staff assistant is it is just the lowest level ranking staffer in a Senate office. Most Congress members have that position too. However, they also wanted this staff assistant to be her personal aide when she was in San Francisco, which included everything from like driving her around, like you said, to just like being at her side, being her body person, basically, everywhere she went. And it was really, I shouldn't say really important, it was required, according to her, that this person be a local San Franciscan. Not because they needed a deep policy understanding of the local issues, but because when she was driving around the city, she liked to point at things and like talk about it. And she wanted to have somebody, she preferred having people in the car with her who like she could talk about San Francisco with. And so...
I love that, by the way. That's so cool.
So like that was the luck, right? Is like, I was not an Ivy Leaguer, right? Like normally these jobs go to like brilliant 4.0 Ivy League kids. Like that was not me. I was a 3.5 University of Oregon rugby player. But I knew a person in her office. My mom knew one of her former staffers. Her chief of staff or state director went to my high school. And I could say in my cover letter, I'm a city fucking kid. I know the city like the back of my hand. Oh, you live on the, on the Vallejo Street steps? Well, my dad and I used to drive by that every day on the way to school, on the way to like pick up like pork buns, right? So like that was the luck, was like being the city kid. It just timing wise, like I don't think they had anybody else where they're like this kid kind of fits the bill. Might not be the most brilliant guy.
And so you get this jump ahead. So what was that like? And
It was
how long did you
incredible.
do that for?
I did it for less than a year and a half. So I did it for, I basically did it until she decided to run again. And then I said, okay, I'm over this. And I shouldn't say I'm over this. I said, I got what I needed out of this. There was still room for growth. I could have gone up a bit, but I couldn't really justify working for her as I viewed. Like she at that point was very old. Senate terms are 6 years plus a 1 to 2 year campaign cycle. Her deciding to run again would have brought her to, 96 years old, which I was
And
just
you
like,
couldn't back that.
no. And the reality was that, like, I don't want to say I told you so, but like, all respect to her, I'm so grateful for the opportunity she gave me. But like, before she passed away, like, she was losing her marbles. She had dementia. She had no idea what was going on, and she was one of the most powerful people in the country, and that was why I left. But so the job itself was incredible. It was like, when she wasn't in California, my job was to sit in the office and take basically calls from constituents. We want her to support this. Why is she doing that? Thank you for doing this. But I also had what was called a casework portfolio of basically helping California constituents with, specifically veterans with issues with the VA or the DOD. But when she was in California, my job was just to be with her. And so we would spend our days, I would spend my days with her, whether it was at her house or driving her.
I'm guessing this was another example of what you shared before about with the Bidens, where they're like, who's this kid spending all this time hanging out with Diane?
Yeah. I mean, it was
like you jumped into the deep end of the pool
really quick.
You got dropped in,
yeah,
right? Air dropped in.
Yeah. And, I think it was like, I mean, my staffers that I worked with in Feinstein's office were amazing. I'm still friends with a lot of them. But, I think there was probably always this feeling of like, are you serious? Like, here's people who've worked for her for years, making shit pay, working, 80 hours a week.
I think they make TV shows or movies about this exact, like, who's this
and
guy?
Then I get to I'm just kind of dropped in, and like, I have more access to her than anybody objectively. Like, that is not up for debate. Like,
to summarize, what did you gain from that experience?
So,
because there's no way.
Yeah,
you got your PhD in politics, a year out of college to some, maybe not a PhD, but you got exposure that you could not. It wasn't a PhD. What you got was priceless education or information.
It was priceless education, and again, but it was less about like the education of like civics, right? It wasn't like I wasn't going to the Hill with her and advising her on policy decisions. It was more of like, back to like the leadership and coaching. It was like, I got to bear witness to like one of the most successful leaders this country's ever seen on a hyper personal level, and see how that person functions when the lights and cameras like are not on them, and when they are. And so, was
there a big difference?
No, and that was one of the most incredible. There was no difference. Mm-hmm. What you saw on TV was what I saw back.
And osmosis is a big part. Just by being in the room or being around somebody, you pick up so much more than you probably ever recognize.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a conversation I was having that was similar to this a while back with a buddy, and he asked me a similar question. And like, one of the things that stuck that she famously was not a lawyer. She never went to law school, but she was the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is like the all-powerful legal council basically in the Senate, with power over everything from confirming judicial nominees to challenging the constitutionality of certain law, like everything. And one of the things I'll never forget is like, over time, what I gained from her was just like learning how to present my arguments and learning how to converse. Because, when I was 22 spending days at a time sitting next to this person, I wanted her to think I was smart. I wanted her to think I wasn't just this like scummy city kid, right? And like, I would say stuff to say stuff, and she would back me into corners within seconds. Right? Not in a demeaning way, like by asking me questions, where I would very quickly realize, thinking to myself, like, why did I just say that? What was I trying to do with that? What did I think I was going to get out of this? And she would so quickly get me to a point where I realized I had no fucking idea what I was talking about. Why would I think I should be talking about this stuff?
So you've now adopted the Dan Goldensohn approach of only speak when you have something valuable to say, or you know your shit?
Yeah, or only present ideas that you can back up and defend.
That's a smart. That's very good counsel.
Yeah.
Right?
But learn that from from experience with this person. And again, I think the relationship we had, somebody said recently, like, oh, she was a mentor to you. She was not a mentor. That's not what the relationship was. My mentor were like the people in my office. She was like a grandmother figure, right? Like she was like, we were spending the days together. We were eating. She would bring me an extra hard-boiled egg in the car, right? And she wasn't looking for a mentoree. She had thousands of staffers, right? What she wanted somebody she could shoot the shit with, and who if that person said dumb shit to her, she could slap around and be like, "Shut the fuck! What are you saying?" No, right? That's much more grandmotherly than it is mentor. And so that was kind of the relationship. It was hyper personal. We were friends. Yeah. So I think the main thing I learned from her directly was debate skills / just knowing how to present my arguments. But again, not like a legal setting, just like when I'm having a discussion with somebody, when I'm debating a friend or having a conversation with a friend about an issue, not getting mad and feeling like, no, this is explaining how I feel.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's super fascinating. And what an incredible opportunity to be able to engage. And the fact that you can articulate the difference between grandmotherly, slap you around, and mentoring, even that I think is just kind of supports your EQ, like your recognition of those things. Clearly that's part of your superpower or your skill set is the recognition of how this all kind of works socially or communicatively.
Yeah.
But I would love to dig into it all day, but we can't. So let's jump to this. What happened next in the political realm from that?
So
was that the springboard, or was that a major feather in your cap that allowed you to continue to move forward?
It was the latter. It was so like I said, I was with her for about like 16 months, I think. She then made the announcement or the decision to run again, where I was kind of at that point, I was like,
Peaced out.
I appreciate this, but that's my sign to go. I had friends living in LA. I was dating my ex-girlfriend at the time, who was wonderful, but she was living closer to LA. We kind of were like both in a place of like, well, what do we want to do? Where do we want to go? I wanted to go to New York. She didn't. I had all these friends in LA. I was like, what about LA? So basically, I quit the Senate. Took some time off, traveled a little bit, and then I moved.
When you say you quit the Senate, what do you mean?
I left Feinstein's office.
Okay,
I put in my 2 weeks or a month, and I left. So I moved to Los Angeles with no job, and I felt pretty confident at the time, like with my resume, that I would be good. Probably too confident, right? Like I was still a 24-year-old guy. Like it was a cool thing, but I thought I was the shit. Like I wasn't, and especially coming like. That was if I wanted to move to DC, I would have been great. I would have been the sexiest, it would have been an amazing hire. But like I was moving to LA, like people don't care. Like a lot of these media execs are like, who's Feinstein, right? So I moved to LA, didn't have a job for a while. I moved into Koreatown with a buddy of mine into this shitty little apartment, and I just pounded the pavement. Like I probably applied to 200 places. I started reaching out to everybody I knew. Got a bunch of offers, but a lot of them were kind of like more local political offers that weren't paying me very well. So basically, to summarize, I ended up getting a job. I sent in a random application to a company called Attention, ATTN. And Attention was at the time, progressive political media company, digital media company, who kind of specializes in explaining and breaking down complex social and political issues to a primarily millennial audience using like video content. Which like now sounds like, that's just video content. But like 6 years ago, that was like the thing, right? Like Now This, Attention, Vice, like these were the companies who were like really realizing like, video content is the future of social media, of the internet, and frankly of monetizing the internet as well. Attention was, the CEO of Attention was Scooter Braun's former partner. Scooter Braun being Justin Bieber's manager, Ariana Grande's manager. So he came from like a hyper extreme music and entertainment marketing background. Badass dude. I reached out to him. I emailed him directly. I did some research and basically sold myself as like, I pitched them on this. I said, basically I said to them, my argument was, what people don't understand about the Senate is that senators and congressmen and women, when they have ideas and opinions about the world around them, that's not based upon like them reading a bunch of articles and formulating an opinion. It's based upon the fact that they have staff around them who are reading those articles and taking that content, formulating their own ideas, and then presenting that to the decision makers with a suggestion of, a decision to be made. Well, when you have an institution like the Senate or Congress that like isn't paying staff a lot of money, who are those decision makers who are those staff members who are in the inner circle? They're like 22 to like 34-year-olds, right? And like, how are they getting their news? They're not really reading the New York Times. They might be, but like, they're watching Vice, they're watching Now This. They're consuming online content specifically about these issues. So my argument to them was like, you guys actually, I don't think you guys understand the impact your work is having. You're not just making cute Facebook videos. Like, you're actually influencing how these people think. And I want to help you grow that and like build that. And I see that you guys are doing this at the intersection of like media and entertainment, celebrities, A-listers, brands, musicians, and politicians. Like, I want to like get in there with you, but I also want to learn from you guys because like you guys are the best at this. And they hired me right away. Started as the executive assistant to the CEO, but he was amazing. He would like, I would do all the assistant stuff, but also he was fantastic. He brought me into every meeting. He didn't make me feel like a fly on the wall. It wasn't like I was taking notes in the corner. He was like, this is Charlie. He's here with me.
Rad. I didn't know this piece. Like, I didn't know that. Like, that's magic, right?
Yeah. And so basically, long story short, like within 3 years, went from like his executive assistant to basically being the chief of staff of that company, which meant functionally like running the C-suite, the strategy and political work for the C-suite. So celebrities coming in, the Obamas, major brands like, Verizon or like T-Mobile, like anybody who wanted to do any kind of like politically oriented digital storytelling work that came in through the C-suite, I then like ran strategy for that. And so through that, I ended up building relationships with like a ton of senators' teams and Biden's team.
And you're how old at that point?
25.
Pretty impressive,
26,
right?
25. Yeah.
At 25. Yeah, we're not going to compare. Comparing's not good. I'm not going to compare to you at 25 and me at 25. Let's just say you win in that comparison.
No, there's no comparison though. But
so that introduces you to big hitters.
It introduced me to big hitters, but also it introduces me to like how to think. Like Brad, the CEO, he like thank God for him too, right? Like again, this is one of those kind of like I didn't appreciate it while I was working with him as much as I did.
Thought leader, visionary.
Yeah, because frankly, when I was working with him, there was moments where I was like, "Fuck!" Like I want to be in politics. Like this is this entertainment guy, and like I know he's a badass, but like it's not it's not where I see myself. And like what he brought, the skills. I mean, just the access he gave me, but also like the other piece I learned from him was like, frankly, how to network, and not like how to build real, lasting relationships that kind of cross the personal and professional, so that it wasn't just being introduced and building a Rolodex of these big hitters, but it was like becoming their friends.
But and is that how you got introduced? Because if I recall correctly, you got chased to some degree by the Biden campaign.
So the way,
thereafter.
so what happens is that's basically 3 years. By the end of 3 years, I'm like now like kind of running, like I said, the C-suite operations and strategy, political strategy for these massive projects, and at this point, the Biden team now, they are, this is in preparation for 2020, they've kind of built this like apparatus of like digital advisors. They're like, we know we're behind on this. We're old school. Like we need to take like the best like political digital marketers in the world and like tell us what we should be doing to beat Trump, basically. And because we did a lot of work in that field and we knew them, and we did a lot of work with the Obamas too, we were like on that advisory committee. So, and I was like the representative of us for that. So that's how I got kind of plugged into that. Then it was just like they actually sent a friend of mine who I worked with at Attention, a JD, that was like, hey, we're actually hiring.
I'm sorry, job description?
Job description. Sorry. So this was, and again, so timing wise, this was very early on in that campaign. So like the primary elections have not even happened yet, right? There's like, I don't know if you remember, but like there's like 20 Democratic, it's not just Joe Biden. There's like 20 other Democratic candidates. And when it comes to polling, he's at the very bottom. Like he's losing to everybody. So
So you single-handedly get credit for Joe Biden getting elected through all your skills?
no. But remember, like you said, like so I got this JD. The Attention recommended me to them. They're like, Charlie's your guy. You should talk to him. And what they were looking for was basically like a digital person / brand person, whatever that meant, for Dr. Biden, for Jill Biden, the former second lady, now first lady. They had never done that with her. Like they had never built any type of kind of campaign around her or brand around her. And I turned it down. Like I went through like 2 months of negotiations with them.
Remember, your whole family was very aware of what was going on in your world at this time. We definitely were like, wow.
Yeah. And I ended up I was killing myself. Not over saying no, but like this decision was really, well, and what we didn't even talk about here is fast forward like 10 seconds. It's like the whole year before this, I was studying for law school.
Yep.
I studied for the LSAT. I took the LSAT. I applied to all these schools. I got massive scholarships to all these law schools. I committed to law school. I actually quit this job. When I quit this job, the CEO came in and was like, "You're fucking insane. Like yes, like defer. Like you are running a political department during an election year where every campaign is coming asking us to do work. Like that is a valuable experience to have. Like not telling you not to go to law school, but like do it after this election." And they convinced me. Whether that was the right decision or not, they convinced me. So the whole Biden thing wouldn't have ever happened if I had actually gone to law school. I didn't. That JD came across my desk about 6 days after I decided to stay at Attention. So anyway, I turned them down for a couple reasons. A, he wasn't my horse. Like I was not voting for Joe Biden in the primaries. I was a Bernie Sanders guy. I also, like I said, he was behind in every poll. Like I could have made the bet to say, he might not be my horse, but he'll probably win. Therefore, strategically be smart for me to attach myself to this. Like, but he wasn't. Like he was losing. So I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna. And the salary was shit. So I was like, no, I'm gonna stay at Attention. I'm gonna keep doing work with all these other candidates and him, get all this experience
and then they made you an offer you couldn't refuse at some point?
Well, so then a year later, fast forward, I do this now for a year. I stay in LA. And then a year later, he wins the primary. Shocks everybody, right? The whole country's like, what just happened? And I think about 2 days later, we're in COVID, right? So like COVID hits, now we're in COVID. Everybody, I don't need to explain COVID. We all were struggling in our own ways, stuck in our little spaces, questioning if we were living the lives we're supposed to be living. And all of a sudden I get a text from Joe Biden's senior advisor that just says, "How about now?" ? And at that point, it was like all hands on deck. It's a binary option. You either help or you don't. In my mind, we're fighting fascism. That's how I felt about it. And with COVID, it was just like I was looking for anything to get me out of that world. And like all of a sudden, it wasn't just anything. It was like the most fucking extreme possible thing. And I said, yeah. And a week later, I was on the other side of the country, like kind of starting this journey. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And again, luck, timing, balls, proximity, decision making, sliding doors, all those things came into play in spades on this one. And yeah, and especially with your view of the world, your desire to be a part of it, and you get thrown in there, or you get the opportunity to jump in there, it's stunning. We could go into all kinds of detail, and we just can't from a time perspective. But let's jump ahead. Joe Biden gets elected with a lot of your help. If there's any key points in there, I think it's really interesting. You talked at the beginning about being part of the staff, the transition staff, capital T. And then do you want to talk quickly at all about what transpired after?
Sure. So I think it's important. I'll do a quick version of like that campaign. Once I moved across the country, while the staff at that point, the campaign itself, because now the primaries had ended, he was the Democratic nominee, which means not only can you hire more staff, but like all of the funding and money from all these other campaigns now start funneling in. So they go from barely getting by to like having billions of dollars on hand. Maybe not billions, but hundreds of millions of dollars. And like I said, thousands of staff, but just somehow I end up becoming one of about 12 staff who said, we want you to, because it's COVID, while the campaign headquarters was in Philly, which is where I moved, and I thought I was going to be in Philly, I got a call basically 10 days later after I moved to Philly that said, change of plans. You and 11 others are moving to Wilmington, Delaware to live in a house about a block away from the Bidens, and like you are now the travel team. So I spent the whole campaign flying, across the country every day with Jill Biden. And that was my life. It was, waking up at 4 a.m., flying to Michigan, to North Carolina, to Maine, get back in Delaware at midnight. We've been working all day, so we no time to work, sit at the desk, work for 2 hours, go to sleep for 3 hours, do it all over again, and just do that indefinitely. It was insane. We won, blacked out for a bit because it was just
I can only imagine.
And then, like I said, like you said, ended up getting a White House offer and moved to DC. Again, still in COVID, so everything's like very weird. And so moved to DC and start working in the White House. We get inaugurated on January 20th. That we could do a whole podcast episode on like what that day was like. Just back to the West Wing conversation of like that was my first time, right, being in there, but it wasn't with a party. It was walking in with the president, right? And like all of a sudden, it wasn't like we were visitors. It was like, this is yours now. Like, good luck,
And that goes for the White House and the country.
Yeah. No, it was fucking nuts. That was a crazy, crazy day. But so basically, what ends up happening is, there are probably the most intense background checks in the world to get into this office. And like I said, I went to a state school. I grew up in a college. I grew up in a city. I allowed myself to have fun. I never got into any legal trouble. But like, I smoked some weed in my day. I've done some stuff like that. And you're given something called an SF-86. And because an SF-86 is like this 160-page background check document. It's everything from, we need to know every foreign person you've ever contacted, every place you've ever stayed, those dates, every drug you've ever done, and the dates of those drugs, who did you do those drugs with, and
it comes back.
And I've told some of me and others, it's not just me and a lot of friends are like, specifically around like the drug use, frankly, around marijuana. We know that states are okay, but at the federal level, weed is still very much illegal. And I haven't smoked in 2 years because I've been on this campaign, but I'm like, is that okay? Like, should I, basically, admit to them that I've smoked some weed back in my day and years ago, a few times, and dabbled in some other things in college, basically, and but because the Trump team and their transition was so insane, our background check process was like months delayed. So I don't fill this out until I'm like months into the White House. All of us. Like I've already been there. I've been staffing this thing for months. And I end up getting a call one morning from our chief of staff on a Saturday. And this guy's he's an asshole, but he's nice to me. But he's sorry, I should say he would rarely answer calls in a nice manner. But he said to me, "Morning, Charlie. How are you feeling this morning?" And I instantly knew something was up. I was like, "I'm fine." He said, "I need you to get up. I need you to get a workout in. I need you to drink some coffee, because today's about to be like one of the worst days of your life." And I knew instantly. I was like, didn't pass the background check. I knew my background. I was like, it had to be the weed, basically. Or the college, experimental drug use or whatever. And
the typical stuff that people do. I mean,
and the stuff that,
crazy.
And that was on a Saturday morning. And 2 hours later, I'm on a Zoom call with like our chief of staff who's in tears, crying, and like White House legal counsel. And they say, "Charlie, due to your marijuana use and some other things, we need you to resign, like effective immediately." And I was given no option. It's the White House. It's like, I don't know how to fight this. And so basically, I left the White House. I left my job on a Friday at 11 p.m. and by Saturday at 1 p.m. the next day, I had no job.
Poof.
And, it was insane. I mean, it was like I had just spent a year on this train going 500 miles an hour. And I've left my family. I'm 3,000 miles away from everything I know. My career has, like, everything in my universe. My girlfriend, like, our relationship is far over, right? Like, everything is different. And I'm now in this city that, like, frankly, while I worked in politics, like, I never had a desire to fucking live in D.C. And all of a sudden, it's like, kicked off the train. And I'm, like, dusting myself up and looking around. I'm like, where the fuck am I? What was that? What is this? What just happened? And this is after also like everyone beyond like our family, right? Who's excited and thrilled about this opportunity for me. Like everyone I've ever met is like popping up through the woodwork, texting, like somehow it's one of those things that like just everybody in your universe somehow hears about. Congratulations. This is incredible. And so all of a sudden I'm like, what? Like,
not to mention,
it was crazy.
Running on a super liberal campaign base.
Oh yeah.
And for that, like, it was just mind numbing from the outside world. So listen, we were all devastated by it, but it takes you on another path.
Yeah.
So let's talk about where you are today. Again, we could go, your story's so rapid. Like today, you were working, you had 2 jobs going for a while with Google. Yeah. And then you've got this other one that you're still passionately involved in that ties politics and food.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to close it out with some.
Sure. Yeah. So
I want to hear about like, and this is another one of those. I don't know. I know who he is, and I've been able to Google some. Yeah. What? And here's the amazing thing. I'm like 5 days younger than the guy.
Right.
He's accomplished a fair number of things.
Right.
Staggering.
Yeah.
So what are you doing?
Well, so what I am now is like, I guess you call it a consultant, an advisor. I don't know. But like I have multiple clients who I work with on their kind of public engagement strategies, media strategy. That's everything from like digital.
And this is
content. This is through myself. This is as I work for myself. But also like, what I would say called like executive positioning of like helping principals, CEOs, electeds build their own brands separate from their companies or separate from their campaigns or whatever. The main person I work with is Jose Andres, who is a kind of like world-renowned chef, but like one of the biggest global humanitarians right now, and runs I've said before the biggest, but it's not one of the biggest food-centric NGOs in the world. It's called World Central Kitchen. Now it's about a fundraising operation of about $500 to $600 million a year, distributing over 4 million meals per year in crisis zones. So been in Ukraine since the day after the invasion, Gaza, Israel, Afghanistan, Puerto Rico. Like if it's a political crisis, terrorist crisis, environmental crisis, earthquake, tornado, tsunami, terrorist attack, like we're there. And
this is a built-out operation that can
go. So now it is, right? But this thing started as Jose. Jose was a big-time celebrity chef, basically about 10 years ago, Spanish chef, with a lot of restaurants. But he was no different than like an Emeril Levine kind of thing, like TV guy with a bunch of restaurants, and he started doing this on his own. Him and a buddy would like literally fly on their own into these crisis zones and just start finding kitchens and just like cooking. And slowly but surely they got, a couple of volunteers and more volunteers and hired staff. And within this time span, it's grown from a $0 fundraising thing of it's just him to, like I said, $600 million a year global network / structure that has the staff and operations and funding to get everywhere instantly and feed. And because of that work, he is now a political force, right? And something that not only is a political force, but like he's a political force that Republicans can't fight against, right? Like it's easy for somebody to, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, to like fight against or push back against an activist from the other side. It's a lot harder when you're somebody who's just feeding people and
doing good work for the world.
Watch out. So I met him and his chief of staff on the Biden campaign when I was working with the first lady. We did an event in Florida. He was a big surrogate on the campaign for like Spanish speaking audiences, Puerto Rico, Cubans, like those type of communities. After I left the White House, I did a couple other jobs where I was a strategy director for a progressive political firm. And then I ran a campaign in New York for a young queer progressive state assembly member. After that was all over, I reached out to Jose's chief of staff, basically similar to how I did with the Tension CEO. I just kind of emailed him, and I was like, not sure if you remember me, but this is where we met. This is what I've done. This is what I do. And I will say also, like while all this shit happened with the White House, like I was still close with everybody, right? There wasn't this like get the fuck away. Everybody was horrified.
That's why you got to go to the Christmas
yeah,
party.
everybody like loves, like we're still like, and I still do work with it, right? So like it wasn't like I was like, shit, I can't even talk. It was like, no, that's still my world. I can still proudly wear that and talk about it. And I basically said to Jose's chief of staff, I don't know what you're trying to build, but I know policy, I know politics, I know how to work with very powerful people. I can see this very powerful person who is like getting bigger and bigger every day. I can only assume you don't have a personal office team under him who's like working on his public engagement and his media strategy and his political engagement. I'm sure you have incoming from every congressional office asking him for meetings and photos and sign-offs on op-eds. Like, I'm assuming you have nobody helping you with that. Like, let me know if you need help, because frankly, like, I would love to find the intersection of like federal global politics and food. I've never worked in food, but I love it. So if you need help, let me know. And he called me back. He's like, let's get on the phone.
How long ago was that?
A little over a year ago.
How's that going?
It's fantastic.
Love that?
Yeah. It's like, it's incredible. It's like, it's exactly that. It's simple.
Is it a meeting of your passions?
Yeah. Yeah.
What a wonderful position.
Meeting of my passions, both on the professional level, but also like personal, which is like, I get to take, instead of sitting in a corporate office or on the Hill, taking this meeting in a suit and tie, we're sitting down at a Michelin restaurant, talking over food, but having those same policy and strategic discussions. So it's not just about the work; it's also like how we do the work, because everybody is so food centric. But with that too, it's also like, I pitch them as being more on the political side, but like through my experience at Attention in LA, I have all these years of like high class, kind of like media sales and media strategy experience that I never really thought about a lot when I was in LA, but that people in DC don't have. And so what I've actually ended up doing for them, which is more than I thought, it was different than what I thought I was going to do, was like helping them rebuild their media operation. And by media operation, again, digital content, but also selling TV shows, books, movies, HBO, docs, and especially bringing in brands and trying to monetize that work, because that's just something they haven't done before. And I'm like, I've done that.
It's crazy.
I used to do that.
And how old are you, Charlie?
30. I just turned 30.
30. Son of a gun. Super impressive. Listen, I would love to go so much deeper into all this because there's so much good stuff there, but I think we've captured the majority and we are pushing up against a hard exit. Let me say this. It is so cool to get the story and connect the dots because, again, I think even our family, we know bits and pieces of both the genesis of your interest in this stuff and how you got there, but none of us, other than your parents, I think, have connected all the dots. So it's really, really cool. And for anyone to get to a place where you are right now, which is passionately merging your interests in a way that are both doing good things for the world, are shining a light on things that need light shined on. And dude, you're 30 years old. Let me ask you this. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, magic wand, what would you be doing? Anything. What do you think?
It's honestly, it's not very career oriented. It's not because I'm like, I want to be retired, but I don't. I actually I talked to a financial advisor the other day. They're like, when do you want to be retired? I was like, I like what I do. Actually, it's not really on my mind. I love the work I do. I'd be doing a similar thing to what I'm doing now. Honestly, I'd be wandering around, eating good food, working for and with people that I find incredibly fascinating and influential, not in gross ways, not working with them because it's being close to power, working with them because they are influencing the world and having impact on the world in ways that I love and look up to. And doing that in a way that allows me still to have the autonomy and the lifestyle to be a city kid, like wandering around and picking at, C health score fried fish sticks on the street. Like that's what I love. And, I'm sure that those goals or those ideas will adjust and change. But in this current situation, like in the short-term moment, like it's a pretty good situation. And I love being in New York. I love having the ability to fly back and see you and fly back to LA and see my parents in San Francisco and travel the world. And for as long as this period lasts, I'm pretty happy with it.
Dude, so rad. Let me say this. Congratulations on being where you are and where you want to be. And as the generation above, seeing people like you in the space that you're in, making an impact, supporting people that are doing good things. This is what this country needs. This is what we need. We need people that we can look at like you that are young, energetic, passionate about helping the world be a better place, starting right where we are. Dude, keep doing what you're doing. We love it.
Dude. Yeah.
I love you, brother. Thank
Love
you
you
so
too,
much
man.
for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Super cool.
This is fucking awesome.
Give me a big one.
Love you, man. Thank you.
You.